The Striped Ships, Chapter 3. Before she could move, the boy had ducked into a shed, and she felt the heavy tread behind her on the bridge. She whirled away from the Norman. It was the Bailey master. She knew his step, and hurried through the gate and across the flat top of the motte to the row of sheds that formed the kitchens. Turning her basket out on the trestle table, she began threading the hens on spits with hands made clumsy by their shaking, by a rush of wild, unreasoning joy. Wulfric! Not dead in the fire that had bloomed that day from the thatch of their father's hall, but alive and here and flapping their old signal. Unless it was his ghost, or some cruel, light-headed fancy born of hunger, like those visions she sometimes had of Nurse Editha bringing her a huge honey cake or a whole game pie. Let this not be a fancy, she prayed silently, or a ghost, or a wicked changeling brought by the hidden folk to look like wolf and fool me. Please, Holy Mary, please, Saint Juliana, please, Saint Agnes. She did not know how to pray to the hidden folk, or she would have done so. The instant the last hen was spitted, she snatched up her empty basket, along with one of the ale jugs waiting to be filled, avoiding Bronwyn's watchful eye, and before the undercook could think of a reason to shout zeally, she was back on the drawbridge, huddled against the gatehouse, out of sight, and scanning the twisting Hastings alleyways. Wulfric was nowhere to be seen. It was plain that he was no longer here. Only a couple of the famished and masterless dogs, which were everywhere, wandered in and out of sight. She had no idea where he had gone, or indeed where he had come from, or how to find him. He will come back, she told herself. He was here. I saw him. As God may strike me, I did not make it up. But as the wearisome day of fetching and carrying went on, so, like every other, she grew less and less sure of that. Every time she crossed the drawbridge with her never-ending burdens, she stopped to search for him again. It sickened her to think how many times he might have braved those dogs to come here, and she never seeing him. How was he living, finding food? Saxons for miles around were homeless, landless, starving. She had seen them in the distance from the drawbridge, little roving, dangerous bands of them, and each midday they gathered in sullen knots outside the fortress gates, waiting for such scraps from the garrison's table as the captives had left them. Impossible that one small boy, only 9 years old. He must have found someone to look after him, Juliana told herself. Perhaps mother is alive after all, and he has come to rescue me. She was turning away at mid-afternoon when she caught a flash of movement almost directly below her, in the ditch itself. And there he was, hugging the motte slope to be out of sight of the inner gatehouse, waving wildly to get her attention. He was so close it took her breath. She cast him a quick look over her shoulder, and then fixed her gaze on him as he began signaling, palms pressed together and wriggling forward, like a fish swimming, and pointing toward the salt marshes west of Hastings. Then, with a gesture so urgent his whole small body seemed to plead, he beckoned her. He was asking her to leave, here, now, today, and meet him in the marshes. Did he doubt me? She thought indignantly. He must know I would go to him anywhere, into the marshes, or into a boggle's den, or head first into a well. She nodded vigorously, signing to show she understood. Keeping an anxious watch on the gatehouse, she saw him scramble up the far side of the ditch and out of sight around the curve of the motte. Then, swallowing hard, she turned away. There was no question that she would go. But if he had come to rescue her, why would he plead? It was easy enough to leave the fortress castle if you cared to risk the dangers outside. What was hard, impossible, for the old or ill or the very young, was getting back again, if the sentries decided that you were not worth feeding. Normans rode out regularly, in mailed and well-armed groups, to help themselves to whatever they had overlooked before. But most Saxons inside the palisades, where there was food, took care to stay there. To bring your brother back in with you was out of the question. Surely Wulfric must know that. She had left the castle only twice, in early spring, with a mounted guard, Both times she had been sent by the garrison commander to find where the scurvy grass grew on the edges of the village. His men were suffering the bleeding gums and blindness of the winter-born illness, as were their Saxon slaves. Nobody had scurvy now, but the sentry might not think of that. Juliana reflected half an hour later as she moved nervously toward the outer gatehouse, carrying a small lidded basket she had picked up from the storage shed. No one had stopped her taking it, or seen her drop a double handful of the horse's oats into it, or demanded where she was going. If need be, she could bring back herbs of some sort, tell the sentry in his own hateful tongue that Waitard had wanted them. Then he might let her back in, if need be. Juliana shut her thoughts off. It was ill luck to hope for miracles. Passing under the crude arch of the timbered gatehouse, she glanced quickly at the sentry. It was the one named Hugo, whom his fellows called Mange Bien, with good reason, for he could eat as much at one meal as captive Saxons could get their hands on in a fortnight. He was not ill-natured, for a Norman, though he had tried to wrest her mantle from her when he first saw it. It was the embroidered hem that had caught his fancy. Normans knew nothing of good raiment, she had decided, after a winter of cleaning the mud from garments sewn of poor cloth, with clumsy trimming. By this time every knight wore a cloak of English wool, plundered from dead or living. Common archers like Hugo robbed their prisoners. To keep her own mantle through that freezing winter, she had had to work patterns around the edge of Hugo's, using thread and needle he had seized from some poor Saxon woman, then watching him strutting like a peacock as he wore it. He smirked down at her now as she passed beneath the gatehouse window, and she gave an expressionless glance back. God alone knew when he would discover that she had embroidered pigs and snakes and trolls' heads into the twisting designs he wore. Once across the outer drawbridge, she turned away from the half-burnt village and hurried southwest, feeling exposed and vulnerable. The Normans had swept a circle of wasteland around the fortress. Not a bush or tree or shed was left to provide cover, and there was no mounted guard behind her now. The hairs prickled on the back of her neck, and not only from the raw sea wind. But at last a dip in the sandy ground hid her, and a mile or so of rough and boggy going brought her into the marshes. It was hard pushing through the reeds, and her shoes were soon soaked. But it was safe, from dogs and wandering Saxons, if not from water nixes. And if she knew Wulfric, he would have guessed the way she would come, and he would be near, watching. She was right. A low whistle, like a blackbird's, came from somewhere, and she halted, returning the whistle and peering every which way, for sounds in the marsh deceived one. After a moment, the reeds rustled, and there he was, ruddy color and grin unchanged, though his voice broke as he gasped, "Chilly!" He hurled himself toward her. "Wulfric, oh, Wulf!" He was thinner, and she knew at once when she flung her arms around him, and far dirtier and shabbier than she had ever seen him. No doubt I am too, she thought, as they clung together, pushed away to examine each other, and then clung convulsively again, unable to say a word. It was hard to let go of him. She had not quite realized how she would feel, as if a wound had torn open, or a part of her mind jolted awake that had been asleep or numb. "I knew you'd come," he said at last. "Wulfric, I was afraid for you. The dogs!" She tried to control her voice. "Wolf, I saw them set fire to our thatch, and I thought everyone was—" She swallowed again hard. "Where have you come from? How did you find me? Is mother with you? Is Ragni? Or nurse?" She couldn't stop babbling, giving him no time to answer her questions, barely hearing his. Finally, they quieted themselves, found a tussock of dry ground among the reeds and mallow, and they sat together on it, their hands still clutching and entwined. "No one is with me," Wulfric told her. "I found you by asking, and watching, and hiding, and walking. No one with him? I knew it, really," Juliana told herself. "May God look after us." "You've been here all these months." "Only since St. Ambrose Day. Weeks ago. But how do you get food?" "I help Finn the Dane. He feeds me. Whatever we catch." "Finn? That fisherman who used to? The same. He lives nearby here on the edge of the marsh, in some old fishing sculls, or under them. They never float, but they make a good enough shelter, if you have no other. There was much he was not saying. His round blue eyes never left her face, searching it as if for something he was not sure of finding, and his abrupt, husky voice, it would be as deep as their father's when he grew to manhood. It held a question, too. He had always talked in little bursts like this, watching for a reaction, but no sudden mischievous sparkle lit his face now, and his old unworried composure had changed into something else. He looked older than his 9 years. No, he is 10 now, Juliana reminded herself. He too had passed a birth date 3 months back. Wulfric, where is mother? His eyes wavered, then came back. I don't know. Perhaps Winchester, if all went well. Winchester? Juliana stared at him, but after the shock of surprise, her thoughts rearranged themselves, and she did not know why she had not guessed it before. Of course she would go to Aunt Birgitta and Uncle Robert. Even now, she added with such resentment she could almost taste the gall. Why not now? He is our godfather. He's a Norman. He was the Norman she had once known, about whom she evaded Saxon questions. Robert Fitzrobert, husband to her own mother's older sister. Then especially now, said Wulfric. She turned on him indignantly. You know our father never liked him, or any Norman, nor do I. Wulfric considered this. Well, I don't like him either. He's always meddling, but he can't help where he's born. Juliana made no answer. Old King Edward, who had spent his exiled youth in Normandy, favored Normans, and had ever surrounded himself with them. Uncle Robert Fitzrobert, long an official in the royal court at Winchester, was a rich man, and a worthy one. He had opened his home and purse to his wife's young sister Hildegund when she was orphaned, half grown. Juliana knew her mother looked up to him as some kindly god, not least because when she had yearned for a minor Saxon thane named Baldric, instead of the Norman quarter that was chosen for her, her brother-in-law had silenced Aunt Brigida's scolding and let her have her way. Indeed, he had become a zealous godfather to the children of the match. His godchildren themselves had found him overzealous, forever turning up on ceremonious visits, giving Hildegund tiresome advice about them, which she always took. But this was irksome to no one but themselves. There was little real fault to find with Uncle Robert. Juliana was quite aware of this, except that he was a Norman, and he called Harold Godwinson an oathbreaker, which she. He quarreled with our father, she reminded Wulfric, when Harold Godwinson became king. Our father is dead now, Wulfric said bleakly, and a Norman is king. Mother will be safe in Winchester, if ever she got there. He fell silent, but after a moment roused himself. Perhaps with all of them together. She took Ragni and Nurse Editha and Luswin and one of the grooms. She nearly left it too late. They were firing the thatch as we ran. We kept waiting for you. His voice roughened. Where were you? Not at your needlework in Lord Alfgar's hall. We sent a churl's boy running. I I slipped off to the shore, and then I couldn't get back. Gradually, they fitted their stories together. Baldric had had a lookout watching from Beachy Head. Word of the ships had reached him even as Juliana had stood staring at them on the windy shore. He had charged old Lustwin with the household safety. He sent riders to summon the scattered feared, and then he and Swain, with Lord Alfgar and his son Hereward, and even Schleric, who was only a 12-month older than Juliana, had taken horse for London to warn King Harold Godwinson. It was the last Wulfric had seen of any of them, their 5 horses pounding into the distance on the Lewis road. But the king was not in London. Yea, so, I know that now, he finished. Everyone knew that now. On Michaelmas Eve, Harold had been a week's march north, in York, with nearly 3,000 housecarls, fighting the Norwegians and his brother Tostig for his life and for England. Barely was the battle won when the news came of the Norman ships in Pevensey. Harold and his battle-weary troops had spurred back to London, waited, though not long enough, for reinforcements to gather, and at dawn a fortnight later were standing shoulder to shoulder behind their wall of shields, facing William of Normandy's mounted knights. "And did you know," said Juliana, "that our father stood at King Harold's side, next only to Earl Gurth? All day he was never budged from the lines, except to swing his axe. It was dusk when he was finally cut down. By then there were no lines, and the king and both his brothers had fallen. Lord Alfgar fell too, and Choleric in the first hour. Swain told me." Wulfric stared at her, eyes wide. "Swain told you these things? Himself? You have seen Swain? He is living?" "He was then, 2 days after the battle, wounded and bloody, and—" Juliana searched for but could not find the words to tell how Swain had looked, there in the dimness of the great forest that spread out north of the battlefield, where she and other cautious searchers had found the Saxon survivors, lying among the trees or sitting silently, bathing each other's wounds with water from a little stream, trying to comprehend disaster. An arrow had pierced his thigh, the left one, and there was a great gash in his cheek. They had put cobwebs on it to stop the blood, but there were not enough cobwebs, and I could not find comfrey or even whey bread to ease his wounds. "He will be scarred," Wulfric said. "He will look different." He looked different already, though not from the gash. Again Juliana searched for the words to make Wulfric see the white, strained face, the haunted eyes of their once light-hearted big brother. "I think he did not like to be alive when our father had fallen, and I think a battle was not as he always pictured it when he had listened to our father's tales. As indeed, Wulfric, it is not," she added, feeling a shudder crawl up her spine as she remembered her one shocked, indelible glimpse of the battlefield on Caldbeck Hill, strewn with scarlet rubbish that had once been men and horses, with stooped, slow figures of priests and women moving through it, searching for something recognizable to bury, and over all the vast resonant hum of thousands of flies. There had been nothing like that in the tales of glory that she too had listened to eagerly at Baldric's knee. "But where is he now?" Wulfric insisted. "You have not told me where Swain went. What did he mean to do?" "I don't know. He said little to me, and he made me go out of the forest and promise not to come back. But wherever he is, he means to kill Normans. He said the battle was not ended, and would never be ended while he drew breath." They were silent a while. Around them the cattail's stems had begun to rustle and stir in the breeze of sunset. Juliana plucked one of the big, gray-green, hairy leaves from the nearest marsh mallow and stroked its velvet with fingers that were roughened and broken-nailed from her new life. The old life, with its fabrics soft as this leaf, its fine-spun wools and the long mornings, half tedious, half absorbing, of work and chatter over the embroidery frames, had never seemed more distant. There seemed to be nothing further to be said about Swain, who had turned his face from them. But there was much yet to learn about Wulfric. Juliana threw aside the leaf and her profitless thoughts. "Why are you not in Winchester?" she demanded. "If you fled with Mother and Ragni—" "We fled no farther than Lewes to the Priory. It was crowded to bursting, folks from Pevensey and every hamlet around, babies, old ones. Saywold the ironsmith brought his goat. But brother Edric, that kinsman of father's, the monk with the lame arm, yea so, he took us in. We only had 3 horses, Elf and the old bay and Mother's mare. And Elf was lame." There was a spark of reproach in Wulfric's glance, which softened as it met hers into a half-smile. "Well, limping. We had to ride double. Mother kept saying we must hurry to Winchester to keep Ragni safe. But then she would cry and say we must wait for you. Lustwin finally made her go on next morning." Juliana nodded, the picture clear and familiar. Unless their father, or Uncle Robert, was present, their mother always ended up doing as the servants advised. "But you," she persisted. Wulfric studied her with a slightly mullish look hardening his ruddy face. "I helped Lustwin make her go. I said I could stay at the Priory and wait until you came, and they could send for us. But once they left, I started back to Pevensey. I was sure I could find you, but—" "You little fool!" cried Juliana, her mind filled with the pictures of the bloody market square. Normans were swarming and shouting, hoofs clattering, Ronwin screaming, and the harvest cow bawling as it was slaughtered. You never got there. I barely got back to the priory. Normans everywhere, killing, burning barns, burning seed corn, Jilly. Wulfric's voice broke. I found a foxhole and I squeezed in somehow, and I stayed till I could get back over the wall. He managed a shaky laugh, which Juliana could not join in. After that, old Edric kept me under his thumb. I was there half the winter, fetching and carrying in the infirmary, scrubbing basins. But I finally got away, during Lent it was, climbed the wall behind the leper hut, leaving Edric to tell mother the Normans got you. I doubt he'll need to. Wulfric studied his chapped hands and then met her eyes. I doubt mother ever got to Winchester. She never sent for me, all those weeks. Juliana caught her breath. They had got there. They must have. They could not be lost. Not now, just when she thought them safe. Mother and nurse, old Luswin, little Ragni with her hay gold curls. No, there were scores for reasons of delay. Normans on the roads, the winter mud, a lame horse. Doubtless they had all claimed shelter at some nun's minster till travel was safer. You did not wait long enough, she scolded. You should have stayed with Edric, or started toward Winchester, not here. But, Jilly, I got word of you. One day in Lewis I saw Oswig, that ploughman of father's. Not much has changed for him, Wulfric added bitterly. He lives in the same hut, he ploughs the same fields, but not for our father, for a red-nosed knight named Drogo, who holds our lands, our woods, our sheep and horses. Ay, and some Norman count owns him, along with the whole of Pevensey, and half of Sussex. Everything that was Harold Godwinson's. Stop. It's no use raging. Well, they built a castle inside the old Roman fort. You can see it from everywhere, sticking up there, lording it over the town. Wulfric gave a savage kick to a clump of reeds. Well, Oswig saw you captured with some others, going toward Ashburnham, he thought. So I went there. Then I went on, other places, asking and asking. I knew you'd be somewhere. I knew I'd find you. And I have. But what? How? Juliana blinked the sudden tears back. Wulfric, I can do nothing for you. Nothing. They would never let me bring you inside the palisade. You are better off with Finn the Dane. I don't want to go inside the palisade. Not to stay there, Jilly. You don't like it, do you? They make you work and work. And I don't want to stay with Finn the Dane. Do you want the ravens to feed us? Juliana said wearily. I want what I always wanted, Wulfric told her, to go to school to the monks and become a scripter, as Edgar promised me. Juliana could only stare at him. That long-promised plan, like the rest of the world they had known before the ships came, seemed as remote as heaven. The famous school of Christ Church, their half-brother Edgar and his Benedictine brotherhood. They were in Canterbury. Wulfric, we must get to Mother. Canterbury is miles and miles from here. It's closer than Winchester by far, but in the opposite direction, and we don't know the way, and there's no food. We can ask the way. We could not get to Winchester, not now, said Wulfric, who was watching her closely. Norman warriors on every road, west and northwest. Finn thinks there must be uprisings. May they prosper, Juliana said grimly. As for food, I can net fish and steer a boat. Finn taught me. Wulfric's voice trailed off. Even he, thought Juliana, could see that they had no net, no boat, and could use neither on a journey overland. Yet they must live somehow, and they could not stay here. She prodded her mind, forcing it into activity as she would kick a lazy horse. For 7 months she had made no plan. Saxons were sure to avenge Harold. The scattered feared would reassemble. The uprisings would gather force and finally regain the land. She had never doubted it. Meanwhile, today was servitude, and tomorrow like today. Now suddenly, tomorrow was blank as new linen. If they were not to sit here forever in these reeds, she must make a new pattern. for her and Wulfric both. The Priory would accept a boy, but not his sister. Swain might be anywhere, might be dead. And Pevensey, for now, belonged to enemies. They had never in their lives journeyed farther than Lewis, but they must go somewhere. Winchester. Uncle Robert, she thought, and she was swept away by deep uneasiness. If one could be sure that mother and nurse and Ragney had truly reached there, if they had not, for an instant she stared straight at the possibility. Without Baldric, Hildegun, or even nurse, Robert Fitzrobert's authority over his godchildren would be absolute. His benevolent eye would be like a hawk's, and they would be truly conquered. She and Wulfric would grow up Norman. She wrenched her mind from the picture. Mother must be there, and I must believe it, Juliana thought. We must go to Mother, Wulf. First to Pevensey, beg our bread from Oswig, or one of our churls, till it's safer to travel west. It is safe now to travel east. It is safe nowhere. She knew the whole Hastings area was Norman infested. Exasperated, she waved a hand at a flight of ducks wheeling in over the harbor to settle among the reeds. If we could fly like those birds. We can sail, announced Wulfric, surprising her. He saw it and grinned. Finn will take us out of Hastings in his boat. He has said so. Perhaps to Rye. We can walk after that. We'll find food somehow, Jilly. In a sennight, maybe two. I could be there, learning. Say you'll go. As she gazed at him, out-argued, cornered, silenced, he added, I'm going. I am. Alone, if I must. She believed him. Nobody was more obstinate or less realistic. And alone, in this week or two of his, between here and Canterbury, he could vanish, lost or starved, captured for a drudge, or murdered for his clothes. She would never know, and she would never see him again. He was far more obstinate than she. The voice of the Vespers bell drifted over the distance from Fay Camp Abbey. Juliana drew her skimpy mantle closer around her, and answered as she had always answered Wulfric. I'll go,